people change, and I love this, the why, the how, and where they work, no matter where that is in the world. So that draws on all the expertise around workplace design, consulting, asset management, all the way to project development, and so much more that shapes all of us that are in this room and around the world. And so we're going to bring him up today, our first Ben today, to talk about how strategy really works.
Thanks everyone, it's great to be here. It's actually kind of interesting for me to be on the stage because the last signature event that was held in Melbourne was one of the first interactions I actually had with JLL. It was about a week after I was interviewed by Geordie, who's here. There he is. And so it was kind of my first introduction to the company, and it was an exciting one. And here I am now on the stage. So it's been an interesting journey over the last year, although it hasn't been a full year that I've been with JLL yet. But what I think is interesting about what we've just heard is just how much of what we experience as humans and how that impacts on the strategic decision making of a company, and then ultimately how it is able to create value in the world. Now, all of you represent very different companies and you're all working in very different industries and on very different kinds of problems. But universally, what we've just heard is that the human experience, the friction, the problem always precedes the technology innovation that solves for it. And I think the same thing is true in real estate. The human experience of work, at work, is how your company works. So it's almost a bit of a pun, and I'm practicing this because I'm a relatively new dad. Strategy works at work, right? That is, the human experience is how your company actually creates value in the world. And if it can't, then your company can't. So, as Daniel was saying before, JLL, the easiest way to think about it if you're new, but hopefully you're not new because many of you are our clients, but if you're new to JLL, the easiest way to think about what we do is we help you change where you work, we help you change why or how you work, and those things together create what we think of as how to manifest your strategy or how to achieve your ambitions. This is very sensitive. Okay, here we go. So what is strategy then? Well, simply put, strategy is a choice. It's one of 5 choices, and these are 5 integrated choices. This was proposed by the former CEO of P&G, A.G. Lafley, and a business school professor, a colleague of his, Roger Martin. What they talk about as strategy are the choices that you make regarding your ambition, your vision, what you see the world being like as a result of the work that you have done, where you play. So that's not only the markets you choose to operate in or the customers you try to create value for, but actually, physically, the locations that you choose to be in. And whether you're in a prime asset or an industrial park, the physical places where you play as a business. Then how you win, what your business model is. What are you actually doing to create value for customers? What resources and activities do you perform? How do you arbitrage the cost of those things so that the revenue you receive ultimately generates profit? That requires capabilities and systems to support it. Now those choices need to be made in that order, because if you go the bottom up, we all know what happens. We need a CRM, we need to be on Facebook, we need to do something, yada, 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 and then we've got to train people, and we still don't know why we're doing it, but we've run out of money, and it's not getting us to the place that we want it to be. And yet, even though strategy is relatively simple in terms of the choices that you need to make and integrate, most of us fail to execute it properly. This was a study done by HBR and The Economist a few years ago, studying over almost 200 companies with sales exceeding $500 million. So big companies, well-resourced, should be able to attract the right talent, implement the right systems, get the work done. 37% of them failed to achieve their strategic objectives. So what hope is there for everyone else? Well, why do you think those things happened? What's stopping us from getting the strategy done? So this is where I'm going to flip it around and turn it into a little bit of a pop quiz. Don't worry, there's technically no winner here or loser. But what I want you to do is be very honest about your experiences. I'm going to ask you a series of questions. I'm going to ask you to raise your hand if any of these things are familiar to you at work. Has anyone ever insisted on doing everything through a channel? They never permit you to take a shortcut to expedite a decision. Has that ever happened? It doesn't have to be in your current workplace, it could be in a former workplace. Don't worry, again, I said no one's judging you. Sorry. I'm doing this right now. Make a speech, talk as frequently and as possible, as long as possible, and illustrate your points by recounting personal anecdotes about, well, when I was a kid, and this is how yada yada. Has anyone had a leader like that who just kind of likes to get on the soapbox and have a little bit of, I'll tell you how I used to do it? Would you tell me that disruption? When possible, refer almost everything back to a committee for further study and hands are already up. Further study and investigation. The committees must never be less than 5 people, always past the 2-pizza team. Haggle over the precise wording of communications, minutes, and resolutions, and sometimes refer them back to the committee for further grammatical editing. Have you ever been worried about the propriety of a decision? Someone else higher up actually has to make this decision. I can't make the decision, so it's not my problem. We'll wait for further instructions. Has anyone ever had that experience? A lot of this is familiar, right? A lot of this is really familiar, and it comes from the precursor to the CIA's Field Manual for Simple Sabotage of Organizations. This was published, go back. There we go. This was published around the time of the Second World War as a way to strategically interfere with Axis countries' organizations and economies, deliberately slow them down, inhibit their organizations from getting what they needed to do done. We sabotage ourselves every single day. And so as a result, I think it's fair to say that strategy is a human problem. The way that we work doesn't work, and we need to get better at understanding how to make people work well in order for our companies to be able to achieve their ambitions. So at JLL, when we talk about human experience, what we talk about are these 3 things: engagement, empowerment, and fulfillment. How do you get the best out of your workforce? How do you make them feel like they're valued at work? What is it that you invest in to make the workplace somewhere that people actually want to come? And not only that, when they're there, they actually get stuff done. They feel really good and they feel proud of what they've achieved because their workplace is not just recognized for having beanbags and ping pong tables, but because it's actually invented Alexa, or it's done something which has literally changed the lives of people around them. So how can we change that working experience? If engagement, empowerment, and fulfillment are the things that we need to change, how do we change it? Perhaps a better question to ask is, why do we need to change it? And as Stephen said before, and I'm glad because there are so many points of our talks which actually overlap and build on each other, we need to change it because we are in a fundamentally different type of economy than the one that the real estate industry is very familiar with. In fact, all of us are struggling with these problems of the knowledge economy. We changed slides while I wasn't even looking. Knowledge, in fact, is the primary source of value in the world. This is a screenshot of a tool that was developed at MIT, I think Harvard actually, it doesn't matter, one of the good ones, that measured economic complexity. Now, what is economic complexity? This is not an economics lecture, I'm going to be very brief because I am not an economist. Economic complexity are the number of transformations that occur in a supply chain as some raw material is converted into a final product or good which is ultimately exported to the world. And you can kind of see Canada at the center of the world because obviously Justin Trudeau. And what happens as a result of that value is you get better margins, you get to capitalize on the strengths of your local economy, and each of those transformations represent a supply chain transaction which ultimately keeps and captures value in the economy as well. Now it turns out most of that is to do with knowledge-based work. The most complex economies are producing things like telecommunications infrastructure, 5G, Huawei. They're also producing things like computers and chips and very sophisticated things which require a lot of deep research and a lot of lateral disciplines and domains. Turns out that the Atlas of Economic Complexity can predict growth of an economy 10 times better than the world economic forum. So the more complex your economy is, the more likely it is to grow in the next 10 years. So we need to figure out how to work with knowledge better. We have a variety of different ways of doing this. The whole concept of the future of work, if you Google it, you'll probably find one of these different lexicons, whether it's responsive orgs or the Agile Manifesto that we just heard about, or lean startups, or human-centered design, or the 5th discipline, agile holocracies. There are so many different ways that we describe and try to articulate what's happening to work and how we need to change the way that we actually work to get it done. But fundamentally, what it boils down to is we've shifted from an industrial economy where we could control things and focus only on efficiency, and then we'll close systems, because that's how you got rid of the competition, to open, more responsive economies, where things are networked, and where, again, as Stephen said before, your organization is a learning organization, and you're focusing on creating knowledge in your business, which represents the expertise that you export and that you deploy to your clients' businesses to help them create the products and services that matter most to them and their customers. So where do we do all this work? Well, what I've hopefully done is kind of walk you down a path where you already know what I'm going to say. Where do we work every day? In real estate, in the workplace. Yes, in here we think and we do the work in our brains as well. But fundamentally, the way that those places work have traditionally looked a little bit like this. We've been struggling to break out of the silos that are literally created by the boxes that we put all of our people in, the offices in which people work every day. We've been trying to make ourselves more networked and more collaborative and actually see the work in progress, work in public. Can anyone guess whose floor plan this is?
WeWork.
It is actually WeWork. Yeah. So for all of the talk around the future of work, where do you think most of WeWork's valuation comes from? This bit, with the kombucha tap. Now, of course, I'm not being too cynical here, because WeWork is a very interesting company. They do a lot more than just cellular offices and flex workspace. But what they will tell you is that they focus on community, and they sell themselves as the we company. They're a technology company that's all about helping people work better and more flexibly and anywhere you want in the world. But fundamentally, the way they design their offices is pretty much the way we used to design offices in the 1960s. There's nothing particularly innovative about that. So when it comes to place, when you think about the things which are disrupting the industry, like real estate, you have to think about the same patterns of disruption that affect all types of companies. So does anyone remember this company? Did anyone actually use it? It's where you used to be able to check in to your cafe, and if you checked in 5 times in a row and no one else checked in, you'd become the mayor of the cafe. And there were these little like gamified things that people used to do on Foursquare. And then Facebook was like, oh yeah, just turn on location settings. Yeah, we'll do that. Gone. Business over. So there's a lot that we can learn from the way that WeWork has solved for problems of the knowledge economy that have generated its extensive network of locations and features. But fundamentally, most of the features come from that lounge, that community. They don't come from the cellular office. There's not really that much good about it. So we need to understand the work that people are actually doing. And how is that actual work changing? What do people actually need? Because we've talked about the human experience driving the technological innovation because you understand the friction. So what does the work that our people will be doing in their companies in the future look like? Well, fundamentally, it's changing from being very fixed and based on deep expertise, and while that still matters, it's increasingly requiring you to have collaborative skills and interpersonal skills. I think, isn't it Atlassian, or maybe it's the All Blacks? It's basically the no assholes rule. Yeah. So we need to focus on collaboration, communication, people's judgment and decision making, how they get work done with others. Ooh, hang on. We actually need to be more creative leaders, and we need to be more cognitively flexible in the ways that we think about the work that we do. If some of you have gone through a leadership or development training in the past few months or few years even, you've probably heard of something called design thinking. It's kind of everywhere. It's the hot sauce for your innovation program, your human-centered design initiatives. You're being customer-centric, get some design thinking in you. But what you realize once you start doing that is once you've done the work, the empathy, and you've created the prototype, and you've got to go and test it in the market, what are you actually doing? You're doing science. You're formulating a hypothesis, you're gathering data about how effective that hypothesis is, and then you're determining whether or not it worked based on what your significance threshold is. Like, how important is it to be right half the time, or as we saw before with the effectiveness of speech and image recognition, right once every 4 times, or 3 over 4 times, whatever. So we need to start thinking in different ways. As leaders, we need to start thinking in a more multidisciplinary fashion about leadership and how leadership actually works. We also need to understand more than just the way we think. We need to understand the values, the principles, the practices, and the tensions that infect every single part of how your organization runs. This is a tool that was developed by a guy by the name of Aaron Hickman, which I only know of because my wife told me about. And she's, to be honest, the real brains of this operation. But this is the operating system canvas. So these, I should say, are the 12 domains which, if you understand the principles and practices and values of you and your organization, will inform how you organize and team, the structure of your company. How do you make a choice about who's in what teams and why they're in those teams? The innovation, how you learn and evolve as a company. Your meetings, how you actually convene and coordinate, how you share information, how you innovate and steer, how you pay and provide for your people. That is the OS that your company runs on. It's often actually invisible. In fact, it's often not even articulated. It's not in a strategic plan. Sometimes the values are. But fundamentally, what you believe about who gets a corner office, why offices exist, who needs to collaborate, and for what reasons, and why they need daylight or oxygen or something else that humans might need, comes from having a conversation and understanding where the tensions exist. What is it that's stopping you from doing your best work? You think about that. Write those things down. And then once you've written them down with your team, you put them up on the wall where you think they belong. Are they anchored to problems that exist in meetings? We don't have enough meeting rooms, we can never meet when we want to, meetings are always way too long, they run over time. Is it because you don't actually share information properly? Is it because people can't get what they need when they need it, so they need to ask people, and the only way to ask someone, because no one can be seen in this cellular office space, is to send them a meeting invitation, and then they turn up late, and then all of a sudden, meetings and how you share information informs how you innovate as a company. And if you just made information freely available, then you wouldn't need meeting rooms. And you start to see this in the office designs of some of the most innovative companies in the world. This is a strategy design business based in Amsterdam that has actually created a new kind of office space around the type of work they do in strategy. So sometimes when you're running a strategy workshop with companies, you need to be in more of a plenary talk style session where you share information. Sometimes you need to be in a workshop style setting where you're actually putting things up on the walls and you're moving the notes around. Sometimes you need to be in deep reflective practice and asking people really challenging questions like, I'm holding you accountable to incorporating the thing you just learned into the next iteration of this release, and that hasn't happened for 3 weeks now. What's going on? So those require different spatial settings, and you can't just do that with sit-stand desks and a couple of little dividers here and there. You actually have to fundamentally rethink the way that real estate platform actually works. And of course, these things are influenced and informed by technology. We refer to this as digital drive. Most of the narratives around the future of work actually stem from this fourth industrial revolution narrative, machine learning, AI, automation, etc. And those things are important. They won't go away. IoT and integrated data capture and use within a built environment is going to be increasingly important, and emphasis on the integrated bit. But it's not the whole picture. Otherwise, we just end up talking about the robots. We actually do have a WhatsApp chat for Future of Work here, and my colleagues are always sharing the best robot videos. This is a facilities management robot that cleans the floor and will automatically divert itself around me because I'm standing in its way. So I don't know how efficient it is if I keep moving around the foyer, but we need to use data in different ways. We need to start understanding the communities that are within not only our organizations, but our assets. If we're managing the information of our occupiers and we're doing multi-dimensional network analysis, which this is, we can start to see what communities exist with what interest areas within that building and start to more proactively manage the way that we provide food and beverage or maybe that too, health and wellness services, lifestyle, community activation services, events, things that make the assets sticky, and then as an asset portfolio manager, make our portfolio more valuable. We start to see the emergence of things like generative design, which is taking the floor plans, the layouts, the adjacencies that a workplace strategist would once do, and feeding it into an algorithm and saying, optimize the actual material use by 20%. I don't mean reduce it by optimize. Make it easier for the people to move through the egress paths without actually increasing the size of them. Make it prioritize these teams that need to collaborate being close to each other so that they literally can bump into each other in the hallways. And what you see is what that adversarial generative network comes up with looks a lot more natural. Now, there's a whole other question about whether that's even practical to build, but those are the things that we need to start building into the way we build assets, the way we design cities, the way we think about the layout of the offices, and those tasks of adjacency planning or the block and stack that a workplace strategist would once do can start to be assisted by computer technologies as well. Which comes to why and how we actually do that, the practical application, the innovation. To continuously innovate means more than just coming up with a good idea. It means broadening your networks and collaborating sometimes with your customers, multi-party innovation, defining the problems that the industry is experiencing so that we can come together and share the resources and activities to solve for those things. And being more open and networked about it so that we can discover where the technology perhaps already exists, how to bring that in rather than try and duplicate it. How do we partner better? This is going to be driven increasingly, again, by customer needs, but what you see is that those customer needs are converging. People like Accor are now moving into co-working across 1,200 sites. Other hotels are doing the same. You have the emergence of co-living. WeWork are doing the same thing. It's just an apartment building, really. I co-live with another 60 people in my apartment too, but apparently there's something more to it. Airbnb is also investing in design, build, and fit-out services that are not only for their Airbnbs, but also for commercial real estate, so that they can make the sort of live-work integration part of that state more valuable. Now they'll transfer some of that knowledge back to their existing stack as well. But what we know about continuous innovation, this is my political reference for Australia, is that execution is everything. How do you actually get it done? The real risk is in our plans. The way that we do strategy, the way we do innovation at the moment is we think we can guess what the conditions will be like in 3 years, and we make a plan, and we detail all the steps, and we just start walking along that plan. And those behaviors don't serve us anymore. Those are not the skills that you actually need to innovate. They are the skills you need to walk in a straight line. But it's entirely risky. The way that we actually need to behave is much more iterative. Now, there are a number of different models and frameworks for how you can be iterative in your company. The simplest one is build, measure, learn, or act, plan, do, or something of that variety. But it doesn't matter which one you use fundamentally. All of these things tell you the same thing. Define the problem, do something, test the result. Question things, like an artist. Design something, like an engineer or an industrial designer. Test it, like a scientist. Right? Be more multidisciplinary in the way you think about things. Fundamentally, just articulate a hypothesis, because everything you do in business is a guess. Right? We think, therefore, and we'll measure this, and we're right if that happens. Now, if you can increase the rate at which you are testing things, what you're ultimately doing is increasing the rate at which you learn things, and you're reducing the risk of what you invest in things. Because everything is uncertain up here. We don't know what's going to happen. We don't know what people want. We don't know where the market's going. So what do? Instead of designing a business plan, putting $20 million on it, pressing go, and hoping for the best, we run a small test. We test the idea, whether the idea fundamentally has the potential for desirability, feasibility, and viability. Then we prototype it, and we validate whether it actually solves the problem that we thought we were solving for. Or, better yet, whether the problem we thought we were solving for actually exists at all. And then, as we pass these thresholds of investment readiness, and by the way, this is not a made-up model either. This was proposed by Steve Blank, who studied NASA's technology readiness level, and it is exactly the same framework. The way that NASA determines whether technology is operationally ready to sit on a base and launch into space, very expensive, very risky, is by going through these small levels of risk reduction and investing more at each stage, because the uncertainty is coming down as you progress. This is fundamentally what that lean manifesto or agile startups, or I'm crossing over metaphors here, it doesn't matter, is all about. You build something, you measure, you learn. This has been around since the 90s. Rita Gunther McGrath, she proposed the concept of discovery-driven planning that inspired Steve Blank to write about the lean startup, which created Eric Ries's lean startup canvas, which ultimately evolved into the agile manifesto, crossed over with software, and then design thinking came to the table, and you've got basically the history of innovation in about 30 seconds or less. But really, it's a mindset. We need to believe that we don't know. That's not a very comfortable thing for leaders to do. We need to behave in different ways. We need to take that mindset and actually start demonstrating through behavior how to do something different. We need the tools to support that capability, not to have the tool first and then figure out how to use it. The tool comes after the skill. You can build, measure, and learn and test stuff with Post-it notes. You don't need Jira. You might have Office 365. Just use Teams. Don't go to Trello just because it's Trello. Like, what you do with the technology needs to help you with the skill, and what you'll see over time is as you build, as you measure, as you learn, you build knowledge in your business. As you build knowledge in your business, what we've seen is that your business becomes more valuable, therefore it lifts your entire economy and your export potential, and that's good for your shareholders. So when it comes to this concept of discovery-driven planning or strategy as an experience rather than a fixed document, let's return to where we started. We talked about strategy is the answer to 5 questions. Ambition, position, capabilities, systems, and business model, right? How to win. Right? When it comes to doing that work, when it comes to actually delivering it, what we do in the real estate industry is things like transactions, portfolio analysis, design and build. We're dealing with questions of place. We do new ways of working. We act as a talent network for our clients. We help you understand and design for and analyze the human experience of your workplace. That's the people dimension. We help you implement new technologies into your property or your asset. We help you with digital solutions to monitor and measure and integrate. We use technology, like fundamental, the wheel as a technology, so are tables and so are desks and so are meeting rooms. Workplace settings are technologies that ultimately help you. They are the systems by which you do the work that your company needs to do, and they will be different depending on the kind of work that you're doing. So it's interesting to see that already the real estate industry deals in 60% of the most important strategic questions that any company needs to do. And we do it every day. We're not McKinsey, we're not publishing a very expensive report and then going, good luck. We're actually doing it. We're doing it in a lot of different projects, and what we need to be better at doing is measuring it. And measuring what we refer to as the metrics that matter. The metrics that matter are the human experience things. How are your people actually working? How future fit is your portfolio? What does it actually mean to be performing well for your business? And you can probably tell that that is what matters to the business, because if you can't determine how your investment in this place, in that technology, in those people, drives retention of your customers or your costs or anything, your brand or your network, then really you don't know why you're doing what you're doing. So we see that as a way, when we talk about achieving ambitions, we practice it every day. JLL is many things, but one of the most important things is it is an operating system for strategy. It's a way of bringing your strategy to life, to manifesting it in the built environment. So your metrics that matter could be anything from brand expression, they could be cyber security. Has anyone seen Mr. Robot? That's a screenshot from Mr. Robot. It's actually the human layer. That's how he gets into the data center at the end of the day. Sorry, spoiler alert. But it could be about customer conversion. How do you design the retail environment to attract people in and keep them there? What do you put in that ecosystem around the asset to make people feel valued and express the brand that ultimately makes it the difference between an A-grade asset and a premium asset? What is it? Because that brand has tangible value in every other industry. The brand of Coca-Cola, for example, our brand, JLL, is worth $1.9 billion just on the brand alone. So the brand of your building or the brand of your business and the way you manifest that brand through your built environment is super important. That will be sometimes the difference between whether you choose you versus someone else, if all things are equal. And we see this, we see actual evidence of this. This is not one of our guest relationship staff, but I wish it was. When we run guest relations and we implement that and we run a variety of other community activation programs in our workplaces, we actually see a quantifiable 10% increase in staff satisfaction at that workplace. They are happy coming to work because they feel valued, because there's someone there to meet them and help them solve that problem. That is not the traditional remit of facilities management, but that's where facilities management is pivoting into the knowledge economy through community management, through human experience design. And so, don't worry, it's basically a slide on operational excellence. That's important if you want to know more, call me. Future of work are these 5 things, right? It's the human experience first and foremost. It's digital tools and technologies which support people to do different work in a pattern of continuous innovation, right? So these 3 things are what we need to do, because what we want as asset managers, as investors, as real estate managers, is we want better utilization of our workplace. We want to make sure that our portfolio is flexible enough to grow while not costing us too much now, and a whole variety of other things. We want ultimately financial performance. Cash flow is king at the end of the day. But we get that by investing in human experience, digital drive, and continuous innovation. And that isn't an idea either, it's evidence. So we survey corporate real estate every year. We get about 700, 800 responses from leaders of commercial real estate all over the world. And what we see is the ones that are more mature in investing in human experience design, that have sophisticated codified continuous innovation programs, and they use technology not because it's there, but because it serves a fundamental purpose of helping those people work in the workplace better, they are more profitable. The future fit are the future of work. So to build the future of work, to create, shape, manage the future of work, we need to understand that human experience is what ultimately drives the strategic objectives of your business. We need to build coalitions and partner more intelligently with each other as well as our suppliers. We need to understand the fundamental disruption that's occurring at our business model level so that we know what the outcomes we're designing for are and how our people, technology, and place ultimately deliver that, and evolve our ways of working, change the ways that we actually interact. And this is the final point, really. The real estate industry has found itself, I think almost accidentally, but it's a very good thing, at the heart of one of the most important strategic conversations of the 21st century. And that is creating an operating system for work. It is how people work. It's why people work. And so if you think about real estate as an operating system, in the same way that you might think of Linux or any other operating system, or even the operating system Canvas that Aaron developed, if you think about it like that, you can see how we need to be much more integrated. You can see why, as a platform, as an operating system, JLL alone manages 5 billion square feet of real estate around the world. That platform can enable your company to be more responsive, more networked, more learning in almost any geography you want. So how are you designing the operating system for your company? And what real estate platform requirements do you need to bring your strategy to life? Thank you very much for your time.
Just taking lots of notes. So we've got a few questions. I'm just going to ask 2 of them here, just to keep it going. If you are also looking how you can join the conversation and can't quite see up the front here, if you grab your speaker sheet on the back, right down the bottom, you'll be able to see like the app to download and join and the code that you need to ask these questions. But we're getting a lot. The good thing, if your question doesn't get answered, the good thing is we're keeping all of our speakers close together when we're networking next door. So it's not just about the kombucha that's good for networking. So you'll be able to go on and ask all your questions from there. So the first question I want to ask that we got was, how can CEOs see and justify the ROI, we just got a new question, bump me down, sorry, from focusing on the human experience in their companies? So how can CEOs see or justify the ROI of focusing on
see and justify the ROI for human experience?
Yeah.
Okay, so how much does it cost you as a company to your bottom line if a staff member leaves? What if when a staff member comes to your company, they don't stay? They hate it so much in their first year that they leave within 12 months. How much does that cost? It's a lot. It's a multiple of their salary. And on top of that, you've annoyed all the candidates who didn't get the job. And so if it gets re-advertised in the next 3 months, maybe they'll reapply, maybe they won't. But there's a warning signal in why the person who got that job didn't stay, isn't there? So there's brand damage, there's actual cost, then you've got to rehire, your HR start to hate you. And all of those things are very, very quantifiable, probably like, what's the LOI, loss on investment. So maybe it's about saving the loss on investment rather than justifying the return on investment. But if you want a tool, we have a HX diagnostics tool that we can run, and we can tell you how important certain dimensions of the human experience are and how well they're satisfied. We do that over time, and you get leading indicators of why people are leaving. So there's that too.
Well, that's great. Or out there with the
Yeah, or there, yeah,
out
there.
there. Okay, and so it leads on to the final question, which is how do we then train all those people for the future of work?
How do we train people for the
All
future
of
of
them.
work? Okay, so there's the future of work is a problematic term because the implies singular, and that's not true either. Right? Work futures is a little bit better at capturing the uncertainty. Design is probably the most important because it's about, again, questioning what's changing, designing something that represents what you think it is, and testing whether or not it works. And so to train people for the future of work is a bit of a fallacy. I think what you need to do is enable people to test, create a culture of experimentation, shift the accountability from, you said you'd do this by September, to, you ran that test and you learned this, why didn't you build that into the next release? Like the accountability needs to be built into the learning, not the doing, because we don't know what we don't know, therefore we don't know what to tell you to do in the future. So it's not training, it's about skill development. It's about giving people tools and techniques for human experience design and helping them understand how to write a business case for a new technology to perhaps solve one of those problems that you experience in your business or your customers experience in their lives.
That's great. That's a real shift to what we do now, which is like the upfront and then off you go.
Yeah,
so it's that ongoing.
We'll hire you if you've got this particular thing, right? That doesn't mean anything.
That's
I have a lighting design degree. I do not work in real estate. Like, I mean, I do, but I don't know for how long, Jordan.
Well, that's great. I think that you're going to have a lot of people asking you more questions when we're out there
Yeah,
after this. So thank you so much. Thank you, Ben.
Thanks, guys.
Actually, a question just came in saying, why are you wearing a Kodak t-shirt?
Oh, it's obvious, right?
It is
Disruption.
obvious. It is one
Come
of
on.
the biggest companies that held on to, this is what we've always done, this is what we do, and people love us for it. But no, they actually looked at it the wrong way, similar to what we've learned in the first two talks, is that it's not what they love that they did at Kodak. They love taking photos, or they love the outcome, and they didn't innovate, and they held strong. It's a bit like those people that stay in relationships too long. You're like, come on, Kodak, we're all over here now, leave them. And that's what happened. They held on, and then by the time they went, oh, I see, that person, the term you were looking for before was brilliant jerk.
Oh yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
You know, oh yeah, they are a jerk. I should have left them. It was way too long, late for Kodak to catch up. So that's why I'm assuming
Yeah,
you're wearing the Kodak t-shirt.
Yeah, it's just a little callback to great innovation.
Yeah, similar to like the Sun Systems sign like that we saw at Facebook. It's a lot more overgrown now than 2 weeks ago, and you've got to push through, but you can still see it. It's always a good reminder that just because we've always done something and it's worked doesn't mean that it'll continue to work in the future. So that's why he's wearing the t-shirt.
Thanks, Danielle.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, I'll pick out your next shirt. So next we have